Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the third day of the World Rapid and Blitz Championship being held in New York City. Now, after a very tough loss yesterday to Volodar Murzin from Russia, today I'm coming into the final set of 4 games trailing by 1 point. Now, since I am behind by 1 point going to the day, I felt that in order to have a chance to try and win the rapid portion, I would have to score at least 3 points, if not 3.5 or 4, to have a shot. That being said, of course, you still have to play the games and see what happens. So in the first game of the day, I'm playing with the black pieces against the American player, Brandon Jacobson, and the game starts out with the move A4. Now, this is, of course, a comical opening first move, but it actually is very tricky in a way, because after A4, psychologically speaking, you generally assume that you should be better, your opponent is not serious, but after A4 is played, I spent a bit of time before playing this move E5. Now, in my opinion, E5 is completely fine, but it's actually a slight mistake based on the mindset I had going into this game, because when I play E5 and we get E4, even though white has played A4 here, it's very symmetrical, and generally from the get-go, if your opponent plays E4, all the positions with E4, E5 pawn structures tend to be more drawish and solid than any other setup. So after A4, what I think I should have played was the move D5, and the reason that I didn't play this move during the game is because I thought that after D4, let's say I go knight F6 and C4 here, if I ever take, now the move A4 is very useful because after E3, the pawn on A4 stops black from playing B5. That being said, this would have been a better choice because after C4, for example, black can play E6 and bishop B4, and as long as you don't take the pawn on C4, white has simply created a weakness on the B4 square. At any rate, I play E5, we get E4, and now I play the move knight F6. Brandon plays knight C3, and here I go for bishop B4. Now, the reason I played this move is already I actually had a feeling I made a slight mistake due to the symmetrical nature of the pawn structure, and I want to create an imbalance. So we get knight D5, takes, castles, and now we get the move C3, and here I play the move bishop E7. Brandon plays bishop C4, I go D6, and now he plays the move knight E2. I play knight D7, and now we get the move D4. Here I play the move C5, and already here it's very tricky to play because white is finishing his development. The bishops are nicely placed on C4 and C1 here. White's challenging the center, and honestly, you can't really say that white is any worse here. So I play C5, we get castles, and now I play the move queen C7. Now the first thing that I want to highlight here is that in retrospect, I think I should have played the move C6, not C5, because when I played the move C5, I actually thought Brandon was most likely going to play en passant with pawn takes pawn, but ultimately he chooses not to. Now keep that in mind because it's the first opportunity where I expected him to play en passant, and he didn't do it. So I play queen C7. We got pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, and now Brandon plays move A5. Here I play this move bishop G4, and I think this is a move that was simply a mistake in general. The reason I played this move is I thought that if I were to play bishop D7 right away, having this pawn on F3 versus F2 would be beneficial to me, but in reality, it actually is not. If I want to go for this plan, I should simply play bishop D7 and keep the E4 square available for the knight. So I go bishop G4, we get F3, bishop D7, and now we get the move bishop E3 being played, and here I play B5. Now this move is a very serious mistake. What I should have played was the move F5, trying to push my P on the king side, trying to attack immediately, because when I go B5, I simply forgot that Brandon could play this move bishop A2. I was expecting Brandon to play en passant for a second time in the game, and after takes, black should be completely fine. But Brandon plays bishop A2, and already here, now the position is starting to spiral out of control because white is going to play B4, kicking the knight, and if white can go C4 here, for example, suddenly the queen side starts to open up. So I play rook C8, we got queen D2, I play the move rook E8, and now we get B4, here I go knight A6, and now Brandon plays the move rook FC1, intending to play C4 and open up the queen side in a hurry. Here I play the move queen B7, now we get C4, takes, and I play the move knight C7. Now what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to blockade on these light squares potentially, or the dark squares against this pawn march up the board, but as you guys can probably tell, it's already quite difficult to play. Now the other big issue here is that for my opponent, Brandon Jacobson, this is a position where he can tunnel on one plan of trying to play on the queen side. There isn't really anything else going on for him. He's not going to play F4, he's not going to push the pawns on the king side. So already here with only one plan in mind, it's very easy to play, and in rapid chess specifically, this is going to make a big difference. So we get the move A6. Here I play the move queen to b8 in the position, and now we get this move knight c3. Now I play the move knight to a8. If I were to go queen b4, for example, white can play bishop f1 with the idea of rook to b1. If I go bishop f5 stopping it, now white can simply take the pawn on a7. And if I go queen b8 trying to guard the pawn, now after rook b1, queen a8, and rook to b7, all of a sudden everything is collapsing here, and I have a very bad position. So I go knight to a8 here. Brandon plays the move knight to e4. And this move is a very slight mistake. He probably should have retreated with the bishop to d3 or f1, but he plays knight e4. Now I go knight b6, we get bishop to f1, and here I play the move rook d8. Now this move is simply illogical. I don't actually know why I played it. Probably what I should have done is traded the rooks and gone rook c8 here. But I think at this point I was trying to move quickly. I was trying to not get in time pressure, and I simply thought it was a move. But now Brandon plays b5, and suddenly you'll notice these pawns are very close to the end of the board. Temporarily, I have a blockade with the knight on b6, but it is very difficult to play. So I go f5. Now we get the move knight c3, and here I play the move bishop f6. Worth pointing out as well that rook d8 is a very bad move additionally, because later on, if I play like h6, knight c3, just to illustrate the point, if white ever goes knight a4, potentially I can play bishop d8 to protect the knight on b6 and try to maintain the blockade. But once I put the rook on d8 here, now the square is no longer available for the bishop, so white is intending to go knight a4 and queen f2, and already here, as you can tell from the evaluation bar, it's very, very difficult. So I go bishop f6. Now we get the move knight to a4. Here I trade the rooks, and now I play rook c8. Brandon goes queen d2, and here I play the move bishop d8. Now what's really tragic about this situation, and a sign of how out of sorts I was, is that in this position, my initial idea was to trade the knights, go f4, bishop f2, and bishop d8 to try to build the blockade here. But ultimately, I rejected this because in the game, I thought that after bishop d8, queen f2 was not an option here, because after takes, I thought I could go rook c1, pinning the bishop on f1 and winning the pawn on b5. However, as you will notice here, white can simply go bishop takes rook on c1, and I'm down a rook and losing the game. Now, this should never happen, frankly, at the level that I'm at, but this was a clear sign of how off I was, because if I had realized that, I would have traded the knights on a4, played f4, bishop f2, bishop d8, and while I would have been worse in this position, I think there would have been pretty decent chances to save the game. Instead, I trade on a4, and now I regrettably have to play rook c7. If I go f4, now there's bishop a7. The pawns are marching up the board. If I play bishop b6, white can simply trade. And I believe that after a7, rook a8, and rook a6, white is probably close to winning here. Actually, computer thinks that rook c4 is also good enough with a protected pass pawn. And this is simply an epic disaster. So I go rook c7. Brandon plays rook b4, and now I have to play f4, and here he correctly sacrifices the bishop on a7. I take, and now he goes b6. Bishop guards the pawn on a6. Rook and queen guard the pawn on b6, and this is simply very, very hard to play. So I go rook a8. We get b7, rook a7, and now Brandon plays the move queen c2. Queen takes rook would be a losing move here, by the way, because after takes, you cannot promote the pawn because your king is in check. So he goes queen c2. I play g6, bishop d3, and now I play the move king f7. Temporarily, you'll notice that I'm up a bishop here, but the big issue is that both my rook and my queen are very passive. The rook is stuck here. The pawns are basically boxing in the rook. I can't ever move the queen because then white queens the pawn. So I have the two heavy pieces that are very passive, and even though I have the two b's here, due to the passive nature of the queen and the rook, I'm probably completely lost. So we get king f1. Here I play bishop a5, rook b1, and now I go bishop d8 back. Now perhaps I could have played king e7 here, trying to do something, bring the king closer, but I play bishop d8, we get queen b3, and now I play the move bishop a5. Here we get rook c1, and now I play the move bishop d2, and this is a move that effectively loses the game, but the reason I played this move is I thought that if I could get the bishop to e3, create this wooden shield, maybe create some checkmate threats towards the white king, I would have a chance. But ultimately, I probably should have played bishop d8 and hoped that I would survive. I'm going to be honest, white is winning here, but it will still take some technique. Instead, I go bishop d2. Brandon plays rook c6, sacking the rook. A great move here, because now if I take the rook, after takes, king e7 here, white can go queen to b6 with the idea of c7, and these three pawns are worth a whole lot more than the rook on a7. So I go bishop e3, now Brandon plays queen b4, attacking the pawn. Here I go bishop c5, and now we get the move queen a5. Brandon could have sacked the rook for the bishop here and played queen b6, but with limited time, it's very hard to do this, and instead he goes for the logical continuation with queen to a5 and the idea of queen c7. Now here, I am also getting low on time, and I play the move king to e7 after a 30-second think, but it's already a situation here where I should probably sack the rook, give up the rook for the pawns, and after rook c7, queen takes d5. Maybe there's a glimmer of hope here. Maybe I can find a way to survive. Probably not. Actually, I guess there's just takes and queen b5, which I did not see at all during the game, guarding the rook and the bishop, and I'm completely lost. Another sign of the blindness I had at points, but I could have tried this and hoped that he wouldn't see it. At any rate, I go king e7. Now Brandon plays queen c7. The queen is getting traded. White is going to be able to force a pawn through. And here I already could have abandoned the game, but I play the move rook to a8, and now Brandon trades the queens. He sacks the rook for the bishop on c5. And here I resign the game because after pawn takes rook and a7, one of these pawns will get to the end of the board, become a queen, and it's simply a situation where I am missing too much material. So a very unfortunate start to the day with this loss to Brandon. To be clear, Brandon played a very, very good game. He found these sacrifices. From my standpoint, thinking I could play rook c1 and hanging the rook was a clear sign that it was not going to be my day. But nonetheless, there are still 3 rounds left, and you want to give it your best shot. So in the next game, I would win a pretty smooth, very simplistic and positional game against Daniel Darder from Belgium. In the third game of the day, I would draw against Bogdan Daniel Deac from Romania, which set up a classic match in the final game of the tournament where I'm playing with white pieces against Hans Niemann. Now, fortunately, going to this game, it's a situation where there's very little pressure objectively. Neither of us are in the running to try and finish in the top 3. The Russians are dominating this event. I'll talk about that after we go over the game, but it's very clear this is simply a game where you play to play. So I play e4. We get e5, knight f3, knight c6, and now I once again play the Gucci piano. Now, what's really ironic about this rapid portion, as you're about to see, is that when I played this Gucci piano, I got 3 great positions. In the first round, I got a winning position against Rinat Yumabayev. Yesterday in the final round with the white piece against Voldar Mirzin, I had a very nice position as well. I wouldn't say it was winning, but it was very, very pleasant. And now again, I'm going to get a very pleasant position out of the opening against Hans Niemann. So we get the same position where I play knight d5, get h6, bishop e3, d6, takes, and knight e3, and now we get to move castles. Here I castle, Hans plays rook e8, and now I play the move a4 to stop b5. Now in the game against Voldar Mirzin, I believe that he played the move queen to d6, if I remember correctly. Maybe it was bishop e6. Yumabayev also played something pretty similar, but Hans decides to deviate with this move b6, trying to stop me from playing a5. Now I go h3, we get rook b8, and here I play the move c3, trying to take away the squares from the horse. Game continues with queen d6, I play queen e2, and now we get the move g6, trying to stop knight f5. Here I play rook a d1, and now Hans plays this move b5, and this is a huge mistake in the position. I think that at this point, Hans was on autopilot. It makes sense, because since I've moved the rook away from the a file here, for example, if I play king h1 b5, this isn't as logical, because now the file's open for the rook, but I've moved the rook away, so in this position, b5 makes a lot of sense. However, it is a huge blunder, as we're about to see, because I trade the pawns, and now I sack the bishop with bishop takes pawn, and after rook takes bishop, I have the move d4 here, opening up this diagonal to attack the rook, but also if black moves the rook, now I can take the pawn, knight guards the pawn forks the queen and the knight, rook attacks the queen, and I'm going to be up by at least a pawn after the next 2 moves. So let's just say here, takes, and let's just say rook e1. At this point, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Hans very clearly missed this idea with d4, and at this point, as you can tell from the valuation bar, I should be completely winning. So Hans sacks the rook with pawn takes pawn. I take the rook. Black cannot capture the knight on e3, as the queen will hang, so he goes rook takes pawn. I play knight c4, queen d5, and here I decide to trade the pawns on d4, trade the queens on d5, and now it's time to take stock of the position. Now in this position, I have a rook in return for a bishop and a pawn here. The pawn on d4 is a little bit weak here, so I should be close to winning with correct play. Now for some reason here, I spent a little bit of time, I think it was at this move here where I spent the time before playing knight d2. What I should have played here was a simple move rook to e1, because after rook to e1, black has to trade the rooks, and now in this position, it's still possibly defendable for black after bishop to e6. I guess computer doesn't agree whatsoever. With a knight and pawn for the rook, but there's definitely no risk whatsoever. Now, it's not so much about risk so much as making good practical decisions, and here I play the move knight d2. Hans plays rook e2, and now I play this move rook e1 after a 2-minute think, and this is the start of going in a very, very wrong direction. Now, my initial intention here was to play knight to b3, and after rook takes b2, knight takes d4, rook takes d4, bishop e6, and rook to c1 here. I have a rook in return for a bishop and a pawn. It's not necessarily completely winning, but from a technical standpoint, I think that I should win this game pretty much every time, and this was my intention. But then I started second guessing myself, and I thought, well, if we reach this position here, I don't see a conclusive win. So I don't see a conclusive win in this position, even though I'm much better with no risk. So let's look for something else. So I end up spending 2 minutes, and I decide to play this move rook e1, and now after d3, white is still better, but you'll notice that black is getting a pawn that is very close to the end of the board here, and even though it's better, there is actually some risk here, which I completely underestimated in the position, because now after rook c1, knight b4, knight e1, we get the move bishop a6, and here I thought I should be much better after something like knight to b3 and knight d4, but then I thought, you know what, why not just go f3? Because now if black were to I played knight b3, sorry. We get king f8, and now I play this move knight c5, bishop b5, and now I play this move f3. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there because I'm going a little bit fast. But what happens here is that initially I was going to put the knight on f3, and then I thought I can use this knight, go to c5, play f3, and I should be winning. So we get this position here where I play the move f3, and this is actually a very serious mistake, and now Hans capitalizes on this mistake. Now, I thought that when I played f3, if black was knight f4, I simply go king to f2. The king is in the center of the board here. Pawn on e2 is weak, and I should win the game. But when I played f3, I completely overlooked this idea of knight to e3 here. And after this move, it's already starting to get a little bit dangerous. Now here I play the move b3 after another long think, spending 2.5 minutes here on this move, which is just really, really a sign of losing control. What I initially wanted to play was knight e4, but then I rejected it because I saw that after knight to d3 here, takes. If I play this move knight to c3, black has this really nice move, knight to d1 here, threatening to queen the pawn and shielding the rook. Probably I still should have done this because after knight takes e2, bishop e2, and rook c7, there's basically no chance that I can ever lose this game. I guess black can take, and after rook to c2, bishop f3, the game should end in a draw, but there's no risk of losing. Even b4 here is another option to keep the game going, and it's just no chance to mess up. So I should have done this, but then I thought, you know what? Why not play b3? Because if I'm not going to go for that position with the rook versus the bishop and the knight, and I'm not going to go king f2 and allow knight takes b2, which by the way loses because it just shows how out of it I am. I thought, well, why not play b3 so that I can go king f2 later and not hang the pawn on b2. But now after knight to d1, suddenly my king is stuck. It cannot get to the center of the board here. The knight covers f2, the pawn covers f1, and now I can't even play knight e4 because after knight to d3 takes, black is going to queen this pawn. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this has become extremely complicated, and to make matters worse, I burned up my entire time advantage by this point, and that portends very poorly for the rest of the game. So I play the move rook to a1. We get king e7, and now I play rook a7. This also probably isn't best, but we get king d6, knight to e4, king c6, and now I play the move knight f2. Now the idea behind knight f2 is that black is threatening to go knight d3 here, so if I play knight f2, there are no squares available for the knight on b4. We get f5, and now I play this move rook to a8. Now you will notice the bar is going down in a hurry here, and the main reason is that basically these knights can't go anywhere, and I also can't really attack these pawns with my rook on a7. So I play rook a8, we get knight e3, and now I play the move rook to a1 here. At this point, it's really, really bad because if I play knight h1, now black can play knight bc2. If we trade, the pawn is going to queen with the knight guarding it. And if I play king f2, now there's knight to d1 check, bishop guards the pawn, I lose the knight on e1, and now I lose the game. So already here, it's very, very difficult to play. So I play the move rook to a1, anticipating knight c2, where I can move the rook, and now we get king d5. Here I play rook c1, stopping knight c2, we get c6, and now I play this move h4. Here we get king d4, and now I play this move g3. Probably what I should have done in this position was something like f4 instead to open up the square for the knight to go to f3 just to be safe. Computer thinks it's losing. I actually think that if I'd played f4, good chance that I could have saved this game. But I end up playing h4 trying to activate the f2 knight versus playing f4 to activate the knight on e1. We get king d4, here I play g3, and now we get to move knight c2. Now you'll notice computer does not like this move. It thinks that if black plays move h5, this is simply winning here, because if I ever move my knight to h3, there's knight d3, and after takes, suddenly the king is coming forward, the knight is coming to d1, and this is a total disaster. So here I play the move rook takes knight, we get takes, king c3, knight e1, king d2, knight g2, queen takes, and knight h3. Now you'll notice here that we've reached an endgame with even number of pawns on the board. However, the pawn on b3 is a weakness, and this passed c pawn is very fast, so the game is not completely over. So we get king d2, and now I play this move king to f2, and this is actually very reminiscent of something that happened to me on day one, where in my mind, I was going to play one move, and I had seen a position in my head, and then when I saw a position on the board, I played the wrong sequence. Now, my idea after king d2 was to play knight f4, and then I played king f2, and I suddenly realized that, wait, the idea was to go knight f4, and after g5 takes, knight e6, g4, then I go king f2, and I'm completely fine. But instead, I play the move king to f2 right away, and now after king c3 and knight f4, I've basically given black one extra tempo to where you can take the pawn and push this pawn, versus this example where after knight f4, king c3, takes and king takes b3 here. Now at the very least, I can go g4 here, and I think this is a draw, although even knight to e7 is also good enough in this position. But at any rate, I simply see the position wrong, and I go here. And now after king b3, knight g6, and c5, I'm in a situation where black is a passed pawn. You'll notice here that I do have 1 minute and 42 seconds on the clock, so it should be okay, but I spend a lot of time before playing g4, and this is just a huge blunder, after which I'm losing the game. Now, it's really inexplicable to do this, but what I would say about the blunders is that it's very clear to me, and this is not in any way some kind of excuse, but it's very clear to me that as I'm getting a little bit older, when I get low on time or I spend a lot of time, it's very clear that my brain basically just explodes, for lack of a better way of putting it. I'm just not able to keep it together, and I pay a huge price here, because when I go g4, this move, I thought the black had to take, and then after c4, knight e5, c3, knight f3, I'm still saving the game. It should be a draw here. But when I go g4, black can play c4 without trading the pawns. And now if I go knight e5, c3, there's no f3 square available to go to d4, and I'm just losing the game. Now, the way to draw this position would have been to play the move king to e3 here, because after c4, I can play knight to f4, c3, and after knight to e6, if black goes c2, I play knight d4, I sack the horse, and after king to f4, bishop to, let's just say, d7, now I can go g4, takes, king d3, and here I can play h5, followed by g5, getting rid of the one last black pawn on the board, and the game will end in a draw. So I have 1 minute 40 seconds on the clock here, and I should find this, but I end up playing g4, and now after c4, with such little time on the clock, there's just no way back. So I take on f5, we get c3, I play f6, and now bishop c4 is played to stop the pawn from moving up the board, and at this point, black is simply pushing p, and this is technically lost. So I go knight f4, we get c2, knight e2, he takes, and now I play f7. At least in this position, I have a queen and a pawn versus the queen and the bishop, but the biggest issue I have here is that all the endgames without queens are losing, because if we get some position like this, just to illustrate the point, check and bishop b5. The problem is this is an edge pawn, but it is the correct color as a light square bishop. So all the endgames where queens come off the board, I am simply losing. So we reach this endgame. Hans plays bishop b5. Here I play queen b8. I also came very close to just blundering on the spot here with queen to f6, after which black can play queen b2, creating the right triangle and forcing an endgame and winning. So I spent a lot of time here. I ended up going queen b8 with 16 seconds, and now after queen b2, king g3, check, king f4, check, king g3, and king c4. The game is effectively lost here because black is just slowly going to bring the king back, and unfortunately, due to the pawn being the right color, I can't even trade the queens off the board. So at this point, it's basically over. I do play on here, but considering the time situation and just the fact that the position is lost, I do end up losing here. I check. We get a bunch of moves. Eventually, Hans brings his king all the way over to the king side. Perhaps I will point out that I should not have played the move h5 right here, putting the pawn on the same color as the bishop. But frankly, even if I go king g2, the same thing is going to happen where black brings the king back, and eventually, they'll all end up losing. So I do play h5, we get queen e5, queen f6, king d6, king d7. Eventually, Hans runs the king all the way over. and I'm unable to save the pawn on h5. And as I mentioned before, if this bishop were the other color, say this bishop were on a dark square, I could maybe have some faint glimmers of hope, but because it's the right color as the pawn, there's just nothing I can do. So I play queen c3, king h7, play on for quite a few more moves. Eventually, Hans starts pushing the pawn. The queen covers all the critical squares on e5, and now I play queen d7. We get king g6, queen c8, queen g5, king h1, and now the move h4. Here I check. We get king g7, queen b2, queen f6, and now I play the move queen b7. We have queen e5 being played, king g2, king g6, king h1, and now Hans puts the bishop on d5, targeting the queen and the pawn. Here I play queen b1, we get queen f5. Again, I cannot trade the queens here because then it's the right color pawn. So I played queen b6 with 1 second left on the clock, but I ended up just deciding to resign because after king h5 or king g5, basically any move, once I lose the pawn on f3, there will simply be no way to stop a checkmate. So it's very, very disappointing to lose this final game. It was a game where I got a winning position out of the opening before basically losing my mind. To his credit, Hans found this move, knight to e3 and knight to d1, which was a very, very nice plan. So it's very disappointing to lose like this, but as I said in my post-game interview on my Kick channel, while I'm unhappy with this, I was not in the running to finish in the top 3 spots. So because I wasn't in contention, while it's disappointing, it's not really that big of a deal. Now, if this loss cost me like 3rd place, for example, or 1st place, make no mistake about it, I'd be very, very upset about this game. But because that wasn't the case, even though it's disappointing, it's not really that big of a deal. Now, I do have no doubt that Hans is going to make some kind of big deal about it. But at any rate, it is just one game. And while it's disappointing, luckily, it was not in an event where I actually was playing for 1st place. So what I will add is that you guys are probably wondering about the actual results. Now, I believe the final standings were Volodar Murzin, the talented Russian junior player, would win the event. He gets 1st place. 2nd place was Sasha Grishchuk from Russia as well, a very, very seasoned veteran, one of the longtime top 10 players, someone in recent times who has not had the chance to play due to the obvious conflict that's going on. So it's really great to see Sasha at 41 finishing in the top 3. I might have my order wrong. I believe I have it correct. And then in 3rd place, it's Jan Nepomniachtchi, the runner for the World Championship 2 times in a row. So it's a clean sweep for Russia in the rapid portion. They finished 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. But the biggest shout out, of course, goes to Volodar Murzin, who went undefeated in the entire rapid event. He's a junior who's been overlooked, but hopefully with this result, maybe he'll get some invitations and have a chance to compete against the top dogs. So that's going to do it for this recap. Obviously a very disappointing day for me, but we do have the Blitz coming up after the rest day tomorrow. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap, even if the results are a little bit disappointing. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with a recap after the 1st day of the Blitz when hopefully I do a little bit better. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day. See you. Bye.